72,000 feet, a lethal altitude. Without warning, a violent violet blue light flooded the cockpit from above, below, left, and right. All instrument panels spun madly. The headset filled only with piercing white noise. Outside the starboard window, a translucent leviathan, impossible to explain by any known logic, was slowly rising from the ice crystal clouds. It was too vast, too immense to have any point of reference. Above its hexagonal main body, a massive gas sac pulsed like a heart, ionizing the surrounding air into an eerie indigo-purple halo. Beneath the main structure hung hundreds of tentacles, each longer than the wingspan of this reconnaissance aircraft. Now, all their tips were rotating in unison, locked directly onto my cockpit. The altimeter began spinning backward. This U-2 reconnaissance plane was being hauled straight upward by a force that defied all laws of physics. Sensors along the left wing failed one after another. The titanium alloy fuselage let out a hair-raising sound of metal tearing. A dendritic arc of electricity ignited along the nearest tentacle. I slammed the transmit button. Mayday, mayday. Pound 331 declaring emergency. I see a massive aerospace. The radio went dead. All electronic screens instantly dissolved into snow static. The highest level alarm blared through the cockpit. A web of violet static electricity crawled across the bulletproof glass. The oxygen supply valve froze instantly, ice crystals visibly climbing up the tube. The creature's gas sac above contracted violently, as if the surrounding air had been sucked dry in an instant. The emergency oxygen mask was ripped into midair, froze solid in a minus 60-degree cold, then shattered into powder under the violent pressure differential. I gripped the control stick, yanking and shoving frantically, but the wings gave no response. The world's highest flying reconnaissance aircraft now hung motionless, like an insect sealed in amber, suspended at the very center of a deep violet light field at 72,000 feet. 9 hours earlier, Al Dhafra Air Base, UAE, the fluorescent lights flickered in a mission briefing room. The projection screen displayed target coordinate grids over a nuclear test site in western China. Major Mark Coleman confirmed the flight parameters. Cruising altitude 70,000 feet, speed window 9 knots, with only a 9-knot margin between stall and overspeed. Any aerodynamic disturbance would be fatal. Takeoff procedure: chase vehicle following until rotation. Steep angle climb immediately after gear up. Passing through the tropopause at 50,000 feet, turbulence kept the airframe shaking continuously. 75 minutes later, the U-2S leveled off at 70,000 feet and entered the planned reconnaissance route. The IN/ASQ 230 Signals Intelligence Pod and SYRS. 2 multispectral camera completed self-checks. Nominal. Routine call relayed from Control Center. Dragon Lady 331. Entering target area. Commence data collection. I performed a visual check outside the cockpit. The sky was deep indigo, the curvature of the Earth visibly discernible. Below, at 65,000 feet, a blanket of ice crystal clouds reflected sunlight. Visual scan showed no anomalies. Minute 37. Large-scale, anomalous green air glow appeared along the horizon. Coordinates: 92 degrees, 14 minutes east longitude, 38 degrees, 27 minutes north latitude. Altitude approximately 65,000 feet. The green air glow spread irregularly, its source not fixed, continuously shifting. Following procedure, I marked the coordinates of the anomalous meteorological phenomenon and returned to the primary route. Minute 41. The SYRS 2 shortwave infrared channel captured the thermal outline within the airglow region. A symmetrical hexagonal structure, with a thermal radiation footprint exceeding that of any known aircraft by 2 orders of magnitude. I keyed the mic, Dragon Lady 331, observing an unidentified meteorological phenomenon. Coordinates 92 degrees, 14 minutes east, 38 degrees, 27 minutes north. Altitude 65,000 feet. Request confirmation of high-altitude balloon activity in the area. Control Center replied after 37 seconds. Negative. All airspace clear. Possible ice cloud reflection anomaly. Minute 43. The anomalous light zone began climbing vertically from 65,000 feet to 70,000 feet in 19 seconds. Vertical velocity 189 knots, exceeding the climb envelope of any known aircraft. I executed an evasion maneuver, correcting heading 15 degrees left. The light zone adjusted its trajectory in sync, maintaining relative bearing unchanged. Control center cut in. Dragon Lady 331. Confirm again. Is the target still moving? Still moving. Tracking in sync. I assess it as active pursuit. The in/ALQ. 221 radar warning receiver activated, indicating continuous illumination by an unknown frequency electromagnetic wave. Outside the cockpit, the sky's base color shifted from deep indigo to an extremely pale blue, the hue change uniformly covering the entire field of view. I deployed the in/ALE 50-towed decoy and requested mission abort and return to base. Control center approved. 14 seconds after the turn, a 0. 3 PS, eye pressure fluctuation surged through the cockpit. The pressure suit automatically compensated at 70,000 feet with an external pressure of 0.05 atmospheres. Such a pressure disturbance defied any meteorological model. 18 seconds after the turn, the aircraft was seized by a vertical acceleration. The altimeter climbed from 72,000 feet to 78,000 feet in just 5 seconds, while the airspeed indicator plummeted past the stall boundary. Outside the cockpit, the entire visible spectrum shifted toward indigo, transforming the sky into the depths of an ocean. I pushed the throttle to full. The J-75 engine roared with 43 for knots of thrust, but it was futile. A massive organism filled the entire field of vision above. Its gas-filled organs blanketed the upper sky, the semi-transparent tissue revealing ionized gases flowing through hexagonal veins, emitting a gradient of purple and blue light. Hundreds of tentacles, each exceeding the wingspan of a U-2, extended simultaneously from the main body. The crystal sensors at the tips of the tentacles rotated in unison, all locking onto the cockpit. 2 tentacles executed a sweeping strike. Their movement defied inertia. Acceleration curves showed no mass constraint, with terminal velocity peaking instantaneously. The first tentacle grazed the left wing. The titanium skin at the point of contact vaporized instantly, leaving a basketball-sized hole, the edge glowing with a persistent orange-red fusion light. All left-wing sensor arrays reported damage, and the aircraft rolled more than 40 degrees to the left. I applied full rudder to the right and maximized aileron trim, barely managing to hold on. The second tentacle struck the in/ALE 50-towed decoy. The decoy disintegrated in an explosion, the steel cable melting and retracting at subsonic speed, debris grazing the vertical stabilizer. The outer layer of my pressure suit on my left arm was also penetrated, the hole about 7 millimeters in diameter. My skin came into contact with the 0.05 atmosphere environment, and the surface tissue froze instantly. The pain signal traveled along the ulnar nerve to my central nervous system. I shut off the left wing fuel pump and switched to crossfeed. The damage list for the left wing structure refreshed on the multi-function display, entirely red. The cockpit began to vibrate at a low frequency. The vibration frequency drifted downward from 12 Hz to 8 Hz, stabilizing at 7. 5 Hz. My teeth resonated within the jawbone, and the sutures of my skull responded in kind. Cracks appeared in the instrument panel glass, spreading along stress lines. The characters on the multifunction display began to double, and my eyes lost their ability to focus at the resonant frequency. Infrasound. The vestibular system's input signals mismatched with visual signals. I forced my eyes to refocus. The pressure gauge showed the cabin pressure dropping at a rate of 0.2 psi per second, with the pressure suit's breech continuously depressurizing. Corona discharges appeared on the inside of the canopy, arcs traveling along the seal strips. The gas-filled organs completed their contraction. The pressure trap entered its strongest phase. The U-2 was yanked upward again, the vertical acceleration pinning my body into the ejection seat. The altimeter needle accelerated clockwise, 81,000 feet, 82,000 feet. The airspeed continued to fall. I gripped the control stick, full deflection to the side, and pushed forward, attempting to enter a dive. The elevator response lagged by 2 seconds, with aerodynamic surfaces losing over 70% efficiency in the thin upper atmosphere. I couldn't recover. The crystal sensors on the second tentacle shifted from indigo to a pale red, adjusting their lock parameters. Tree-like arcs of electricity reappeared on the surface of the tentacle, preparing to discharge. The arcs penetrated the surrounding gases from the tentacle skin, creating a corona discharge, enveloping the entire tentacle in a purplish-white aura. The radio reception link recovered for 0. 3 seconds. Fragments of the control center's voice entered. Dragon Lady. Signal lost. Please confirm. Status unidentifiable. The transmission link was blocked across all frequencies. I pressed the transmit button, but the noise power overwhelmed any voice. Unreachable. The gas sac began its second contraction, entering the next phase of the 7-minute and 23-second breathing cycle. The pressure trap effect intensified, and the U-2's fuselage groaned under structural overload, the skin on the back showing plastic deformation ripples. Cracks formed at the edge of the left wing's hull, extending toward the wing root at a rate of about 4 centimeters per second. The cockpit's resonant frequency locked at 7 Hertz. The vibrations coursed through my entire skeletal structure. The faceplate of my pressure suit helmet reflected the pulsating indigo light from the gas sac, its frequency decoupled from the resonance, flickering independently. The retinal blood vessels in my eyes deformed mechanically under the vibrations, creating moving blind spots in my field of vision. Tentacles completed their energy buildup. The discharge path conducted from the base of the tentacle along the tree-like neural network to the crystal at the tip, the ionization channel fully established. The first tentacle, led by its crystal tip, struck directly toward the cockpit, its trajectory correction speed exceeding the visual tracking frequency. Impact. High-voltage bioelectric currents pierced the cockpit canopy. The glass remained intact. Instead, the currents fractured the surface, forming plasma channels that directly coupled into the interior. All electronic systems overloaded simultaneously. The main display exploded, spewing molten shards of glass. The radio equipment's internal circuit boards were charred, and the enclosures cracked. The N/ASQ 230 Signals Intelligence pod automatically switched to optical isolation protection mode, writing cache data to an electromagnetically shielded storage unit. The current conducted along the aircraft's metal framework, seeking a ground path. The left wing's fuel lines became a secondary discharge route, igniting residual JP-7 fuel vapor inside. The fire detectors triggered. The fire extinguishers deployed automatically, flooding the engine bay with halon 1301 gas. The current dissipated. The tentacles detached from the canopy's surface, the electrical arcs breaking. The air sac completed its second contraction. The pressure trap reached maximum strength. The altimeter pointed to 84,500 feet. Outside the cockpit, the sky was completely drowned in indigo light patterns, the horizon invisible. The U-2's nose began to drop as lift was completely lost. The pitch angle plummeted to negative 35 degrees, entering a stall and inverted spin. The attitude indicator's rotation saturated, making it unreadable. The mechanical gyroscope hit its stops. The spin began. Third turn of the spin. The pressure trap vanished instantly after reaching its peak. The air sac completed one full contraction expansion cycle, entering the relaxation phase. Lift suddenly returned. I executed the recovery immediately after the attitude indicator came back online. Full rudder deflection, pitch neutral. The U-2 stopped spinning at 3. 5 turns, the nose diving at a shallow negative 15-degree angle. Airspeed slowly recovered above the stall boundary. Level flight was restored. Damage assessment began. The left wing skin had a basketball-sized gap, with cracks extending to the main spar but not penetrating it. Tissue in the left arm of my pressure suit had turned from a light purple to black, indicating the freeze damage did not reach the muscle layer. Radio reception links intermittently restored, but transmission links remained blocked. The onboard oxygen system functioned normally with stable pressure. Control center called in, the signal intermittent. Dragon Lady 331, partial communication captured. Status report. I pressed the transmit button and compressed the information in standard military briefing format. Entity contact. Diameter over 1,000 feet. Hexagonal symmetry. Tentacle attack with high voltage discharge. Air sac organs controlling pressure fields. Attack cycle consistently 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Infrasound resonance frequency locked between 7 and 12 Hertz. Electromagnetic interference blocking all bands. Left wing structural damage. Pressure suit compromised, currently controllable. 40 seconds of silence. Control center replied. Satellite will be overhead in 6 minutes, acquiring real-time imaging of the target area. Maintain observation distance. I rejected the request and submitted a course modification. Fuel uncertain. Heading aligned with base, continuing to provide observation data. The entity did not pursue. After the air sac relaxed, it entered a floating state, all tentacles retracting beneath the main body, the intensity of the light patterns steadily decreasing. Multispectral cameras showed it slowly descending, heading northeast at a vertical rate of about 300 feet per minute. Inside the cockpit, only the instrument warning beeps and the hum of the oxygen generator remained. I activated the signal's intelligence pod's passive recording mode and began logging the observation parameters. Pulsation cycle, electromagnetic interference bandwidth, tentacle attack range, resonance frequency lock range. On the fourth observation, the crystal sensors at the tips of the tentacles shifted from indigo to a pale red. The rate of change was uniform. During each relaxation phase, the red component increased by approximately 3%. By the 15th observation, the crystals were entirely pink. I logged. Crystal color change is coupled with the breathing cycle. Driving mechanism unknown. Calculating the escape window. 4 minutes and 11 seconds remain before the next contraction. With the current spacing and heading angle, the estimated contact distance is about 77 nautical miles. Fuel and glide ratio can support an emergency landing. Control center called. Satellite will be overhead in 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Maintain current heading. I acknowledged receipt and prioritized the crystal color change data in the telemetry downlink. As the satellite passed overhead, the data link experienced a sudden handshake signal. Synchronization was lost. 300 yards to the right of the U-2, the clouds were pierced. A second massive entity emerged vertically from beneath the ice crystal cloud blanket. Its air sac light patterns 42% higher in frequency than the first, with a color bias towards the ultraviolet spectrum, indicating a significantly faster metabolic rate. Its size was about 60% of the first entity. It had the same number of tentacles, but they were shorter, with the initial color of the crystal sensors being pink. The distance between the two entities was 980 yards. I was directly in the middle. Immediate evasion, pitched to a negative 40-degree dive, sacrificing altitude for separation speed. Airspeed climbed from cruise to 0, 72 Mach in 4 seconds, and the aircraft's structure began to vibrate. The second entity's air bladder has completed its pre-contraction. It entered the attack ready state before piercing through the cloud layer. A pressure trap formed beneath me, perpendicular to my dive path. The vertical acceleration yanked the U-2 upwards, forcing the dive trajectory to bend. The altimeter stopped its descent and began to rotate counterclockwise. Simultaneously, the first entity transitioned from a floating state to full activation. The intensity of the air bladder's light pattern switched from dim to full power within 0. 8 seconds, and all tentacles unfurled from beneath the main body, ready for combat. The crystal sensors, which had previously been a pale red, now all turned indigo. This action completely negated the 17 observed color gradient patterns. There is coordinated communication between the two entities. This entire encounter is a carefully constructed information trap. This was no random encounter. They deliberately allowed me to record their rhythms, locking me into a fixed flight path as I passed beneath the satellite, then closing the net around me. The second entity emitted a subsonic resonance. The frequency locked at 8 Hz, with a power density surpassing the single source output of the first entity. The first entity's tentacles simultaneously struck from the left and above. One tentacle pierced the right aileron. The titanium alloy skin at the contact point vaporized, and the tear extended to the aileron hinge. The fuel lines were melted through, and JP-7 fuel began to spray in a mist from the breech, forming a white vapor trail at the tail. The right-wing fuel pump automatically shut down, and the cross-feed system switched to single left-wing fuel supply. The fuel quantity display plummeted. The second tentacle grazed the right side of the engine nacelle. Though it did not penetrate, the electrical discharge coupled into the engine control unit. The J-75 engine's thrust fluctuated, dropping by 12%, and the exhaust temperature sensor was damaged, triggering a second fire warning. The second Halon 1301 fire extinguisher bottle was automatically discharged. The third tentacle's electrical discharge path passed directly above me, striking the dorsal antenna fairing. The VHF/UHF dual-band antenna was physically destroyed. The communication link was severed, downlink telemetry data was interrupted, and the control center's carrier signal was lost. The cockpit resonance continued to intensify. The 8 Hz locked frequency coupled with the first-order natural frequency of the aircraft structure, amplifying the vibration. Rivets on the dorsal skin began to fly off, the first at subsonic speed, the second following closely behind. Fatigue cracks appeared in the structure above the instrument panel, propagating along the stress distribution lines. The resonance created standing waves in the vitreous humor of my eyes, causing double vision on all instrument readings. The capillaries in my nasal mucosa ruptured, and blood droplets, suspended in a zero-gravity environment, splattered onto the inside of the oxygen mask. I executed the mandatory damage control procedures. The right-wing fuel has been isolated, the engine fire extinguished, and the hydraulic system pressure is below nominal, but sufficient to maintain minimum control requirements. The stick feedback force is abnormal. The aileron hydraulic assist has degraded, and the control response delay is 7 times the standard. The second entity initiated a second round of tentacle attacks. 2 tentacles simultaneously struck from below and behind. The rear tentacle pierced the engine exhaust nozzle's expansion section. The breach was about the size of a fist, and the nozzle's deflection plates deformed. High-temperature exhaust gas flooded into the engine nacelle, and the additional thermal load exceeded the fire suppression system's design threshold. The J-75 engine's thrust dropped by another 8%, bringing the total thrust loss to 20%. The exhaust temperature indicator spiked into the red over-limit zone, and the engine control unit forced a reduction in fuel flow to protect the turbine. The lower tentacle lashed at the belly sensor bay. Though it did not penetrate, the electrical discharge coupled into the mission avionics system. The external sensor array of the /ASQ, 230 signals intelligence pod overloaded, and 6 of the 8 receiving channels were physically destroyed. The pod automatically switched to a deeper backup mode using ferrite core memory, preserving the cache data intact. The attack ceased. Neither entity executed a fatal finishing move. After completing their attacks, all tentacles retreated to a predetermined distance, maintaining the encirclement. Hundreds of tentacles formed a 3-dimensional interception grid around the cockpit, each tentacle's crystal sensor independently locking onto the aircraft from different angles, distances, and directions. A cage. The air bladder light patterns began to change systematically. The indigo shifted to deep red at an inconsistent rate. The light pattern pulsation frequency also adjusted, switching from a single frequency to a multi-frequency composite modulation, with the power spectrum expanding to full coverage within 5 seconds. The light pattern modulation of the first entity and the second entity synchronized. Both the color change rhythm and the pulsation phase angle were locked in unison. They established a light communication link, with data transfer bandwidth exceeding human communication totals. Fluorescence poured into the cockpit from all directions, illuminating every corner. The blood on the inside of my oxygen mask appeared black under the indigo light. The ice crystals on the frozen tissue of my damaged left arm glowed a faint purple. The tentacle crystals turned completely to deep red and stabilized. The crystalline structures at the tips of the tendrils erupted with full-spectrum scanning light. These creatures were systematically recording, across multiple wavelengths, every detail of a U-2's armor, avionics, and even me inside the cockpit. 73,000 feet. The luminous patterns on the flanking solid airbags pulsed in synchronized rhythm. A cage-like interception grid formed by the tentacles held a reconnaissance aircraft at its center. Left wing damaged. Engines throttled back. All communications severed. I was strapped in, my pressure suit torn at the left arm, with 1 hour and 22 minutes of oxygen remaining. Assessment begins. Option 1. Eject. The Martin Baker State Route 1 ejection seat's operational envelope covered 70,000 feet, theoretically feasible. The solid tendrils reaction time measured less than 3 seconds. From ignition to cockpit separation, the ejection seat required 45 seconds. The tentacles would pierce the ejection trajectory the moment the canopy detached. The tear in the left arm pressure suit measured 7 millimeters. External atmospheric pressure, 0.05 ATM temperature, minus 62 degrees Celsius. Unprotected consciousness would last no more than 12 seconds. Rejected. Option 2, extreme dive. The U-2's maximum dive speed was Mach 85, with current engine thrust reduced by 20%, limiting actual maximum velocity. Calculated fuel leak rate indicated remaining flight time under 28 minutes. The entity's vertical movement speed had been verified to match or exceed the U-2's climb rate. No escape possible under sustained pursuit. Rejected. Option 3, call for support. The VHF/UHF antenna radome was physically destroyed. All transmission links fully blocked. The satellite overpass window had already passed. Next overpass time unknown. No possibility of real-time military response. Rejected. Tactical solutions exhausted. Entity behavior analysis initiated. Attack sequence ceased 6 minutes and 14 seconds ago. Subsequent actions. Tentacles constructing interception grid. Crystalline sensors conducting multi-spectral scans. Airbag luminous patterns synchronizing communication links. The organisms had not executed termination. Attack mode had shifted from destruction to observation. The synchronized scanning had persisted for over 2 full respiratory cycles, with the crystals maintaining a deep red steady state without retraction. Conclusion. The entities were systematically recording target data. Structural damage patterns, system redundancy responses, communication protocol signatures, organic physiological reactions, all had entered the scanning sequence. Cold War era SEER Training Technical Manual, Chapter 3, Article 14. Enemy interrogators do not execute prisoners before intelligence extraction. Execution follows immediately after intelligence value is exhausted. Current status, captured. Shigint pod passive reception mode activated. External sensor array sustained damage to 6 channels. 2 channels remained operational. Scanning bandwidth set to maximum. Reception covering extremely low frequency 3 Hz to extremely high frequency 30 GHz. Data influx. Inter-entity communication utilized fluorosilicon-based modulation. ELF carrier waves mixed with EHF carrier waves for transmission and reception. Communication structure contained image characteristic modulated waveforms. They were exchanging visual data. Estimated frame rate, approximately 24 frames per second. Single-frame data packet size comparable to high-resolution multispectral imagery. Two entities were exchanging scan results at a bandwidth exceeding human communication capacity by 2 orders of magnitude. Repeating structures began appearing in the demodulated signals. Every 5 seconds, a fixed calibration pulse appeared in the communication stream. Pulse duration, 3 seconds. Waveform characteristic, all tendril crystal sensors deactivated. Reception link output zeroed during the full calibration pulse. Upon sensor reactivation, the communication stream resumed from the breakpoint. Observation verified 2 cycles. During the second calibration pulse, the relative positions of the entities underwent minor adjustments. The azimuth angle between the first and second individuals changed by approximately 2 degrees within 3 seconds. External spatial precision control was suspended during the full calibration pulse. Tactical hypothesis, 3 seconds. The collective sensor's complete blackout period. Attention turned to internal communication processing. External perception blind spot. Maneuver plan. Execute a maximum dive angle descent precisely during the next calibration pulse. Exploit the 3-second window to penetrate the tentacle interception grid. Cost analysis. Itemized. Dive acceleration would exceed the U-2 structural limit by 2G. The left wing's main spar already had a crack. Under extreme overload, crack propagation rate could lead to complete spar failure. Probability of airframe disintegration, non-zero. Post-breakout, entity pursuit speed known to match this aircraft. Escape window extended at best 2 to 3 cycles. Insufficient engine thrust, continuous fuel leak. Maximum range far below distance to any diversion airfield. Final alternative forced landing zone. Northern Saudi Arabian desert terrain, hard-packed sand capable of supporting belly landing. Distance approximately 410 nautical miles. Insufficient fuel for powered flight throughout. Final phase would require gliding approach. Probability of arrival, pending calculation. Pressure suit integrity unrecoverable. Frostbite on left arm has progressed from forearm to above elbow joint. Tissue freezing depth reaching full subcutaneous layer. Oxygen supply remaining, 1 hour and 3 minutes. Certain outcome if remaining here. Execution immediately following completion of entity research sequence. Execution decision. Await the next calibration pulse. Execute a full thrust dive escape. Timer set. Next pulse in 41 seconds. System check sequence initiated. Control surfaces preset. Elevators at maximum dive deflection. Ailerons at initial neutral position. Rudder pre-bias 3 degrees right to compensate for left wing lift loss. Fuel pumps switched to cross feed, prioritizing the consumption of remaining fuel in the left wing to reduce bending moment load. Signal intelligence pod records all cache data to armored storage. Ferrite core memory physically locked. Data integrity up to now. Physical communication modulation, respiratory cycle rhythm, crystal sensor response characteristics, optical communication link parameters, calibration pulse intervals, all encoded. Final visual scan upward. 2 entities fill the cockpit window. Air sacs pulse with synchronized rhythms. Deep red, hue locked and unchanged. Hundreds of tentacles maintain a 3-dimensional interception grid, each ending with crystal sensors still locked onto the cockpit from different angles. These never-before-encountered monstrosities are parsing the aircraft systems at a bone-chilling speed. Count down, 5 seconds. Grip the control stick. Thrust lever push to the limit. Engine RPM surges to rated 100%, the damaged turbine emitting a metallic screech, but thrust output holds. The aircraft begins to vibrate violently. Structural stress under maximum thrust tearing at the fuselage. Calibration pulse, instant. All tentacles of the 2 entities pulse with synchronized flashes. Crystal sensors turn inward. Communication pulse peaks saturate the spectrum analyzer, then drop to 0 instantly. 0 seconds. Full push on the stick. Elevators deflected to the maximum dive angle. The U-2's nose plunges downward at a 65-degree angle through the ice crystal clouds. G-force spikes to 3. 8G. Gray out begins at the periphery, converging towards the center. The body is pressed into the ejection seat by vertical acceleration. The spine compressed, pain radiating through the vertebrae. 0. 3-second window exhausted. The tentacles strike at their original coordinates. All miss. The entities reacquire the target. Sensors switch from internal communication to external detection, but the target is now below the interception grid. The U-2 enters a high-speed dive. Airspeed climbs to 0. 88 Mach within 9 seconds. The cockpit glass heats up from aerodynamic heating. Ice crystals instantly vaporizing. Rivets pop from the fuselage skin in quick succession. First, third, seventh. Vibration travels from the tail along the longitudinal axis to the nose. Frequency directly proportional to dive speed. A metallic snap, sound from the left wing root. The wingtip separates at 0. 86 Mach. Residual lift redistributed. Rolling moment sharply increasing. Rudder compensates to maximum deflection, maintaining control. 50,000 feet. Ice crystal cloud blanket approaching. Penetration. The U-2 impacts the ice crystal cloud layer at over 0. 8 Mach. Ice crystals strike the fuselage at supersonic relative velocity, causing dense pitting on the skin. The cockpit glass's external surface erodes rapidly. Light transmission drops by 17%. The sky below becomes visible. Deep blue gradually transitioning to light blue. The tropopause boundary is clear. The temperature inversion layer, the dense atmosphere's edge. Recovery begins. Pull back on the stick for pitch correction. G-force climbs from 3. 8G to 6. 7G. Vision completely grayed out. Blood flow to the retina insufficient. Control stick feedback force reaches maximum. At 6. 7G. The main spar in the left wing cracks. Structural integrity sensors issue a critical warning. The wing spar remains partially intact. Primary lift maintained. Dive angle reduces from 65 degrees to level. Velocity vector stabilizes for horizontal flight. Altitude, 48,000 feet. The electromagnetic signals from the two entities continue to track. They pursue from above, descending at a rate matching the U-2's dive. The distance between them and the U-2 narrows 11,000 feet during the dive, then reopens during recovery. 17 seconds. The pursuit signal ceases at 32,000 feet. The entities will not enter the troposphere. Dense atmosphere exceeds their air sac buoyancy adjustment range. They hover at 32,000 feet. Indigo light patterns piercing the residual cloud layer, casting a pale purple diffused light inside the cockpit. 21 seconds later, the light patterns fade. Electromagnetic interference exits all frequency bands. Radio background noise resumes. Emergency frequency 121. 5 megahertz activated. Fuel remaining. 7 minutes of powered flight. Glide range must cover the remaining distance. Cockpit warning list. Structural damage. Hydraulic degradation. Partial communication restoration. Irreversible progression of pressure suit failure. Frostbite on the left arm has passed the elbow, spreading towards the shoulder. Oxygen supply. 41 minutes remaining. Signal intelligence pod storage at full capacity. Altitude, 48,000 feet. Recovery complete. Level flight restored. The system damage list scrolled across the multi-function display. Red entries cascading in an unbroken stream. The left wing's main spar crack had extended to critical length. Structural integrity sensors wailing in a continuous alarm. Deformation of the engine thrust deflector caused a thrust vector offset, requiring persistent right rudder compensation to counter the yaw moment. Fuel leak rate calculated. Remaining powered flight time, 6 minutes, 52 seconds. Hydraulic system pressure dropped to 60% of rated value. Control surface response lag reaching 4. 3 times the standard. Communication recovery sequence initiated. VHF emergency frequency 121. 5 megahertz activated. Transmission power set to maximum. Press the transmit key. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Dragon Lady 331. Damaged reconnaissance aircraft. Coordinates 34 degrees, 12 minutes north. 88 degrees, 05 minutes east. Altitude 48,000 feet. Heading 270. Request emergency vector to nearest alternate airfield. 6 seconds of silence. A relay station locked onto the signal. The voice of the Al Dafra emergency frequency operator in the UAE cut in. Dragon Lady 331. Mayday acknowledged. Radar contact. Vector heading 275. Alternate airfield Saudi King, Khalid Military City. Distance 410 nautical miles. Runway orientation 09/27. Length 3,050 meters. Current weather clear. QNH 1,013 millibars. 410 nautical miles. Fuel insufficient to cover it. Calculated glide ratio. Current altitude 48,000 feet. U-2 glide ratio approximately 23:1. Theoretical maximum glide distance roughly 210 nautical miles. A gap of about 200 nautical miles remained. That gap had to be narrowed during the powered flight segment, using every ounce of remaining fuel. Engine residual thrust dropped to 78% of rated value. The powered flight segment had to satisfy 3 constraints simultaneously: minimize altitude loss, maintain heading, and reach a glide initiation point before fuel exhaustion. Computed result: the glide initiation point needed to be at an altitude above 40,000 feet, no more than 200 nautical miles from the target airfield. Current fuel supported only about 180 nautical miles of powered flight, a gap of 40 nautical miles. Unclosable. Control center called again. Dragon Lady 331, confirm your status. We're receiving partial telemetry dropouts. Repeat, receiving data carrier loss warnings on some channels. I compressed the status report into key fields. Physical contact confirmed. 2 biological entities. Body length exceeding 1,000 feet. Highly intelligent. High voltage bioelectric shock. Infrasound resonance attack. Atmospheric pressure control capability. This aircraft, left wing structural damage. Engine thrust degraded 20%. Pressure soup reached. Left arm frostbite progressing. SIGINT pod has recorded full entity communication data. Request instructions. Control center silence lasted 11 seconds. An abnormal delay. Return tone. Dragon Lady 331. Initiate immediate SIGINT pod data uplink transmission. Use burst mode. All cache data prioritized for return. Communication window allocated first. Data uplink transmission initiated. The SIGINT pod established a data link with the communication system, reading cache data from ferrite core memory, packaging it into burst transmission packets. Total approximately 740 megabytes. Transmission rate adjusted to maximum. Estimated transmission time, 18 seconds. 3 seconds into transmission. Radar warning receiver sounded alerts across all bands. An electromagnetic interference beam shot down from directly above. Frequency coverage blanketed the entire VHF/UHF communication spectrum. Energy density tripling previously recorded values. Bearing determined. Emission source at approximately 32,000 feet. The entities were still hovering. The interference beam, surgical in its precision, severed and locked onto both the 121. 5 megahertz frequency and the data uplink carrier wave. Uplink interrupted. Transmission progress stalled at 17%. Data packet verification failed, requiring retransmission. I looked up through the overhead observation window to confirm. Both entities still at 32,000 feet. Their gas bladder photonic patterns pierced through the thin layer of ice crystal clouds, an indigo base overlaid with synchronized, pulsating deep red modulation. Periodic electrical discharges erupted across the surface of the bladder organs, synchronized with the interference beam emissions. They were directing electromagnetic pulses. That damn bladder was no mere buoyancy organ. The arcing burst across its surface made it clear. They were conducting precise electronic warfare band suppression against me. Control Center called, Dragon Lady 331, data packet corrupted, verification failed, retransmit. I switched to the backup frequency, 243, 0 megahertz military emergency band, and restarted the transmission. 7 seconds into transmission, the interference beam relocked onto the new carrier frequency. Frequency switching response time had shortened by 3 seconds compared to the previous attempt. The entities had completed a spectrum rescan and updated their jamming strategy, learning rate faster than anticipated. Second transmission interrupted. Progress bar stalled at 9%. Control Center calls again. Data reception failed. Please retry during interference gaps. Switching to third backup frequency, UHF 303, 025 megahertz, mission preset encrypted channel, simultaneously enabling frequency hopping spread spectrum mode. Carrier frequency hops between 12 preset points at 30 hops per second using a preset key sequence. Transmission initiated. Interference beam tracks and suppresses continuously for the first 6 hops. Starting at the 7th hop, the interference beam's scanning rate fails to match the hopping rate. Link establishes intermittently, but does not fully break. Data progress bar creeps forward, 23%, 31%, 44%. While hop, interference beam adjusts strategy. The entity switches from precise single frequency suppression to broadband noise jamming, blanketing the entire UHF band. Jamming power density decreases, but coverage bandwidth expands 20-fold. Link signal to noise ratio instantly degrades. Bit error rate exceeds threshold. Transmission cuts off again. Progress bar halts at 53%. Control Center. Partial data received, incomplete. Continue attempts. Remaining fuel-powered flight time. From minutes, 3 seconds. Glide gap widens to 55 nautical miles. Radar warning receiver emits new alert tone. Threat bearing marked below. A third entity enters sensor view. Position, 38,000 feet below, climbing vertically at high speed. Size smaller than the previous 2, approximately 45% of the first. Air sac luminescence pattern flickers at a higher frequency. Color shifting toward ultraviolet. Higher metabolic rate. Newer individual. It frantically adjusts air sac inflation ratio, forcibly adapting to denser air. This juvenile is pushing its limits for the prey. 3 entities now form a 3-dimensional encirclement. 2 above at 32,000 feet conducting electronic suppression. 1 ascending vertically from below. Vertical blockade established. Horizontal escape window closing. Control Center call. Dragon Lady 331. Unknown contact below you. Small radar cross-section. Climbing rapidly. Altitude 37,000 feet. Please confirm. I press the transmit button, compressing my voice to minimal information density. Third entity, juvenile, adapting to tropopause atmosphere pressure, undergoing physiological breakthrough. Estimated to enter attack range in 3 minutes. Repeat, 3 minutes. Decision made for full power burst transmission, abandoning backup transmission protocols. Data to be dumped in a single transmission. Execute emergency descent after transmission. Communications may be permanently lost. Dragon Lady 331 out. Finger releases the transmit button. Then set the SIGINT pod to full power burst mode. All cache data. Electromagnetic interference spectrum scans from first contact. Entity respiratory rhythm time series. Tentacle crystal color change spectral analysis. Fluorine silicon communication modulation. Waveform full spectrum recordings. Calibration pulse interval time domain data. Air sac luminescence pulse frequency and phase angle synchronization data. All interaction signal logs from all 3 entities. All 740 megabytes. Packaged into a single continuous data stream. Strips all checksum and retransmission protocol layers. Raw data pushed directly to the transmit buffer. Single transmission. No retrias. Press send. Data stream radiates at full power from the surviving antenna. The third entity completes interception frequency scan within 12 seconds. Interference beam locks onto the transmission carrier. But the raw data stream lacks retransmission protocols. The interference beam can corrupt data frames, but cannot stop the stream's advance. Bit error rate climbs to 47%. Data integrity degrades, but total data volume continues to pass. 12 seconds. All 740 megabytes transmitted. Estimated completeness 73%. Enough for Intel to understand the threat. Control center voice cuts in, confirming receipt, requesting retransmission of corrupted sections. No retransmisiones. Third entity reaches 34,000 feet, 6,000 feet below aircraft. Execute emergency descent. Control yoke pushed forward. U-2 nose pitches down again at a 45-degree dive angle. Altimeter spins counterclockwise, accelerating. 41,000 feet, 37,000 feet, 33,000 feet. Entity pursuit signal maintains track, but descent rate differential emerges. Aircraft descent rate exceeds entity climb rate. Third entity halts at 30,000 feet. Air sac inflation ratio at physiological limit. Boundary reached. Further descent would crush the sac organ. Altitude 28,000 feet. Airspeed drops to Mach 0. 6. Dive angle gradually reduces to 20 degrees. Altitude 20,000 feet. All entity electromagnetic signals exit detection range. Interference beams recede to background noise. VHF communications restored across all frequencies, but transmit power unreliable due to antenna damage. Altitude 15,000 feet. Fuel exhaustion. The J-75 turbojet flames out, the compressor stalls, and the cockpit noise dies in an instant. Only the whir of the cabin fan and oxygen generator remains. The U-2 transitions into pure gliding flight. Airspeed holds at optimal glide speed. The altimeter shows a descent rate of roughly 1,200 feet per minute. Remaining altitude buys about 12 minutes of glide. The airfield is still some 190 nautical miles away. The gap may be compensated by potential thermal updrafts during the glide. No guarantee. Controls final clear call. Dragon Lady 331. Radar altitude 10,000 feet. Steer heading 275. Field radar has you. Runway lights on. Emergency vehicles standing by. Continue descent. I acknowledge. One last look upward. 3 entities hover above the cloud deck, between 30,000 and 32,000 feet. Their photic patterns arranged in a triangle. The indigo and deep crimson pulses begin to synchronize their decay. They're abandoning pursuit, sinking into the depths of the stratosphere. The youngest, lowest one is the last to vanish from sight, its gas bag photic pattern fading to violet before dissolving into the sky's backdrop. Altitude 8,000 feet. Desert terrain comes in a sharp relief. Pale brown hardpan, sand, and rock interlaced. The airfield lies 5 degrees to the right of course. Heading corrected to 273. Altitude for 1,000 feet. Landing gear extends. Nose gear down and locked. Main gear down. Right side confirms locked. Left side lock indicator flickers. Deformation in the left wing structure prevents the locking mechanism from fully engaging. 1 retraction and extension cycle, then lock confirmed. Altitude 1,200 feet. Runway threshold visible. VASI glide slope indicator shows high. Adjust descent angle. Altitude 300 feet. Runway surface looms large. A desert crosswind blows from the port side. Fine heading adjustments compensate. 2 seconds before touchdown, the airspeed needle edges toward the stall boundary. Touchdown. The left main gear strut, compromised by wing root deformation, absorbs asymmetric overload upon landing. At the 37-meter mark of the rollout, the left main gear strut fractures. The left wingtip strikes the runway, inducing a yaw moment. The airframe pivots around the nose. Full rudder deflection proves futile. The belly scrapes, metal skin grinding against tarmac, producing a continuous cascade of sparks. After 74 meters of rollout, the aircraft comes to a complete stop. The canopy glass is crazed, but not shattered. Cockpit structure intact. No fire in the engine bay. The wail of emergency vehicles approaches from the left side of the runway. I unbuckle, shut down the main power, cut the oxygen supply. The signal intelligence pod's ferrite core memory is manually unlocked. Release mechanism confirmed disengaged. The data armored storage unit is extracted and placed into the encrypted document pouch I carry. The canopy jettison handle is pulled. The ejection mechanism functions properly. The crazed glass pops outward. External air floods the cockpit. Ground temperature roughly 34 degrees Celsius, a 96-degree swing from the minus 62 degrees at altitude. The frostbitten tissue on my left arm erupts in a searing pain signal, transmitting along the brachial plexus to the entire upper limb. Desert sunlight strikes my face. The ambulance stops at the runway's edge. Two medics sprint toward me. The data pouch is tucked into the zippered chest compartment of my flight suit. One final task. Deliver 73% complete 740 megabytes of data to a secure channel. Medical personnel reach the wing. With my uninjured right hand, I unfasten my oxygen mask and hand the data pouch to the first intelligence liaison officer to arrive. It is sealed in a dedicated chain of custody bag and immediately escorted away. A stretcher is laid out. A spinal board is prepared. Frostbite assessment begins with the left brachial plexus nerve damage. Infrasound exposure duration will require vestibular calibration and a full audiometric remapping. All injuries will be logged in detail. My flight suit is cut away. The left arm tissue is deep black, extending from fingertips to mid-upper arm. Frostbite has reached stage 4, deep tissue irreversible. Monitor electrodes are attached. Heart rate reads 104 beats per minute. Blood oxygen saturation, 93%. Consciousness remains. One final visual datum. The sky at the horizon is a normal, pale blue. No indigo photic patterns. No hexagonal outlines. No piercing frequencies. All three entities have vanished into the stratosphere. The ambulance's rear doors close. The engine starts. The vehicle pulls away from the runway. Through the rear window, the U-2 Rex sits at midfield. Emergency vehicle lights crisscrossing the damaged airframe. The left wing, deformed from ground contact, reveals a fractured spar at the missing wingtip. The engine nozzle's expansion section shows a discernible breach. The dorsal antenna fairing is completely destroyed. Medical monitoring continues inside the cabin. I close my eyes. Residual afterimages of indigo and crimson alternating pulses still linger on my retinas, their frequency synchronized with the entity's gas bag photic patterns. Diagnostic report. 4th degree frostbite on the left arm. 7 days post-elbow amputation. Wound healing well. 3 rib fractures. No surgical fixation required. Bilateral tympanic membrane congestion. Cumulative exposure to 7 to 12 hertz infrasound for 9 minutes and 41 seconds. Permanent mild vestibular system damage. Balance function not fully recoverable. Gait recalibration necessary. Neurological sequelae entered into permanent medical record. Signal intelligence pod data transfer complete. 740 megabytes of raw recordings, 73% integrity. Analysis led by NSA. Preliminary assessment confirms a fluorosilicon-based modulation pattern, inconsistent with any known terrestrial biological form. My visual report, integrated with synchronous satellite imagery, has been classified as the Coleman encounter case at top secret level. Within 72 hours of the encounter case submission, the U.S. Air Force revised all high-altitude operational protocols. Temporary altitude ceiling for U-2 and RQ. 4 missions restricted to 55,000 feet until further notice. Over the subsequent 3 months, the global surveillance network reported at least 17 suspected instances of similar entities making brief high-altitude appearances. Distribution ranges from the Arctic Circle to 45 degrees south latitude. All incidents occurred within the 50,000 to 65,000 foot altitude band of the lower stratosphere. Hexagonal light signatures were completely identical. I am permanently grounded from flight duties. 3 weeks after discharge, a civilian-clad intelligence officer visited. No rank insignia, no agency badge. He sat in the ward's visitor chair, briefcase resting on his knee. Major, those entities are still out there. Their numbers are increasing. Are you willing to serve as a consultant in analyzing the incoming data? The ward faced west. Beyond the window, at sunset, residual sunlight scattered off stratospheric ice crystals, producing a faint violet refraction. I looked down at the empty sleeve of my left arm. 12 seconds of silence. I lifted my head. The indigo pulsating light patterns lingering in my right retina had never fully faded. I could no longer distinguish whether this was a mental hallucination or if they still flickered in the depths of my vision. Coordinates. On subsequent missions, NASA's Earth stratospheric simulation maps were annotated. 92 degrees east longitude, 38 degrees north latitude. Passive satellite imaging revealed 3 faint hexagonal light patches still drifting slowly, heading due west.